I never imagined that the hands I once held while teaching him to walk would one day throw water on my face. Life has a strange way of circling back, sometimes gently, sometimes violently. Mine returned with a sting, cold and sudden, like the splash that hit my cheeks that night. I was sitting quietly at the dining table, a small plate in front of me, and the aroma of fresh rice filling the room. I hadn't asked for much. Just one more spoon. Just a little more to soothe the emptiness in my stomach that age had carved into me. But my request was treated as if I had demanded the world. My son looked at me with irritation, as if my existence alone was a burden he had to carry. His wife rolled her eyes, the children whispered, and the room felt heavy with unspoken disgust. I swallowed the bitterness, lowered my voice, and repeated gently, Beta thoughta, sa. Or, before I could finish, he snatched the jug of water and poured it over my head. Not splashed, not spilled. Poured slowly, deliberately, letting every drop humiliate me while everyone watched in stunned silence. The coldness dripped down my face, but the true coldness was in his eyes. I felt the betrayal deeper than the water soaking my clothes. My hands trembled not from age but from the realization that the son I raised with sacrifice, the boy I protected from storms, had become a man who saw me as disposable. I sat there, frozen, unable to move, unable to speak. The children giggled nervously. His wife muttered, "He always exaggerates everything." My son smirked and said, "If you want more, serve yourself. You are not a king here." A lifetime of memories flashed before me. His first school bag, the nights I worked double shifts to ensure he had a better future, the illness I ignored to afford his college fees, the house I bought in his name thinking it would give him security. I had handed him everything without hesitation, and tonight he had taken away the last thing I had left to my dignity. I didn't argue, I didn't shout. Instead, I quietly wiped my face with the corner of my shirt, stood up, and walked to my room. Behind me, the sound of their laughter returned, as if humiliating me was a minor inconvenience in their comfortable evening. I closed the door gently, sat on my bed, and stared at the wall in silence. Something inside me cracked, but not in the way he intended. It wasn't weakness. It wasn't despair. It was awakening, sharp, clear, and irreversible. For years, I had lived in this house thinking I was staying with my family, but that night, I realized I was merely occupying a space where love had disappeared long ago. I was an obligation, an extra mouth, an aging shadow, taking up room in a life that no longer wanted me. As the water dried from my skin, a strange calm settled in my heart. Not anger, not revenge, clarity. I had spent my whole life giving, and they had spent their whole lives taken, but they had forgotten one thing. Everything they had was built on my sacrifices. The accounts, the investments, the property, every brick, and every coin came from my years of labor. And so, I made my decision. Quietly, silently, without a word. That night, as the house slept, I sat with my documents spread across the bedbank papers. Property deeds, investment certificates, passwords, account details, everything still legally mine. My son had always assumed control, acting like the king of a kingdom he never built. But kingship means nothing when the throne belongs to someone else. I gathered the papers, placed them neatly in a folder, and picked up my phone. With slow, steady fingers, I typed an email to my lawyer. Short, crisp, final. I want to transfer everything back to my sole name. Freeze all joint access. Initiate immediate changes. Urgent. I hit send. As the message delivered, a quiet satisfaction washed through me. Warm, steady, powerful. Not because of revenge, but because I had finally chosen myself. I lay back on the bed and whispered into the darkness. Tomorrow, everything changes. When I woke up the next morning, the house felt heavier than usual, like the walls themselves knew something was broken. The dried patch of water still clung to the side of my face like a memory that refused to fade. I sat on the edge of my bed, for a long time, staring at the floor, wondering how a son I raised with my own hands could look at me with such disgust. I had spent decades building a life for him, working overtime, taking loans, skipping meals so he could eat more, sacrificing every comfort so he could have a better chance. Yet here I was, feeling like a stranger in my own home. When I stepped into the kitchen, he was already there, scrolling on his phone, acting as though nothing had happened. He didn't glance up, didn't say good morning, didn't even acknowledge my presence. The silence between us felt colder than the water he threw at me. "Good morning," I said quietly. He continued scrolling. That was it. That tiny, careless sound. Not even a word. Just a noise. If I were an inconvenience, in his morning, I poured myself a small cup of tea, my hands trembling slightly. The cup rattled against the saucer, and finally he looked up, irritation flashing across his face. "Can you not make noise this early?" he snapped. I froze. Early. It was almost noon. And noise? This was the man who blasted music at night, who argued loudly on calls, who never cared about anyone's peace but his own. "But I didn't know it bothered you," I replied. "Well, it does," he said sharply. "You're always in the way. Always asking for something. I provide you a place to stay even though you don't work. Just don't be a problem. There it was, the truth he had been building toward for months. I wasn't his father anymore. I was a burden wearing his father's. Face top, my chest tightened. I never wanted to be a problem. He scoffed. Then don't be. He grabbed his keys and walked out, leaving the door half open behind him. I stood in the kitchen for a while, the steam from my tea fading, just like my place in his life. I walked around the house slowly, touching things I once bought: furniture, appliances, frames, all things that once belonged to me. Things I handed over to him because I wanted him to feel secure. I built this home, and now I felt unwelcome in it. I walked into his old room now, his gaming setup, Ariane found clothes thrown everywhere, empty cans, wrappers, and a pile of unopened mail. One envelope caught my eye because it was addressed to both of us. It was a bank statement. I didn't know why I opened it. Maybe I just wanted to see something that still connected us. I found instead shook me. All the accounts that were originally my savings, retirement funds, investment accounts still had my name as primary holder. Years ago, when I put his name on them as a joint user, I never imagined I would need them again. I simply wanted to make things easier for him, but everything was still legally mine. Every last rupee, every account he assumed belonged to him now. I held the papers for a long moment, and something inside me shifted. Not anger, not revenge, just a cold, heavy clarity. If he saw me as a burden, if he believed he was providing for me, if he thought throwing water at me was acceptable, then maybe it was time to show him what life looked like without the father he took for granted. I walked back to my room, opened the old wooden trunk at the foot of my bed, and took out my passport. The same passport I hadn't touched in years. Dust coated the cover like a reminder of how long I had stayed in this ungrateful place, praying things would get better. They never did. But that afternoon, while he was out, I sat at the dining table, with the bank documents, my phone, and my laptop. My hands were steady now. One call, one transfer, and everything changed. As I moved my funds into a new private account, a strange, peaceful silence washed over me. Not the silence of fear or defeat, but the silence of freedom. When the final confirmation message arrived, I closed the laptop gently. For the first time in years, I felt alive. By sunset, my bags were packed. By nightfall, my ticket was booked. By morning, I would no longer be here. The night before I left, I couldn't sleep. Not because I was nervous, but because my mind kept replaying every moment that had brought me to this point. The laughter we once shared, the struggles we faced together, the pride I felt watching him grow of it, mixed with the sharp sting of the person he had become. I sat by the window, watching the streetlights flicker through the curtains. The house was silent, but not peaceful. It was the kind of silence that grows between people who no longer speak the same language of love. Around 2 a.m. I heard the front door open. He came in loudly, as usual, tossing his shoes against the wall. I listened to him walk through the hallway, talking on the phone with someone. His voice echoed with arrogance. "Yeah, I'm not worried about money," he said. "I've got access to everything. My dad's accounts are basically mine anyway." I closed my eyes. He had no idea that, within hours, none of that would be true anymore. "I'll buy that gaming chair tomorrow," he laughed, "and I might book that Thailand trip too. Why not? It's not like he needs the money." My hands curled into fists, not from anger, but from disappointment so deep it felt physical. So this was his plan, spending what I earned through sweat and aching bones. Without respect, without gratitude, without even asking. He went into his room and slammed the door. Music blasted a few seconds later. I didn't bother reacting. I simply returned to folding the last shirt into my suitcase. As I zipped it up, a strange calm settled inside me. Tomorrow, everything would change. When dawn broke, I was already fully dressed. I wore the same modest clothes I always wore. Nothing fancy, nothing special. Just a father walking away from a life that no longer had space for him. At 7:15 a.m., he finally woke up. I heard him stumble to the kitchen, yawning loudly. I stayed in my room, sitting on the edge of the bed, waiting to. Took less than a minute. "What?" His voice exploded through the house. "WHY's my card?" Declined. He tried again, and again, and again. Each attempt louder, angrier, more desperate. I didn't move. A moment later, he stormed down the hallway and threw my door open without knocking. His hair was messy, his eyes furious. "What did you do?" he shouted. I looked up at him slowly. "Good morning. Don't play games with me," he yelled. "My accounts, my money, it's all gone. Everything is empty. Did you do something?" "My money?" I repeated softly. "Or yours?" He froze. For the first time in months, he didn't have something clever to say. "I built everything," I continued. "Every rupee in those accounts came from my work, my years, my sacrifices. I added your name because I trusted you, not because it belonged to you. You can't just take it," he snapped, voice cracking. "I didn't take anything," I said calmly. "I took back what was mine." His breathing grew heavy. His hands trembled with anger. "So what now?" You just going to leave me with nothing? I stood up, walked past him, and opened the drawer of my nightstand. I pulled out a white envelope and handed it to him. Inside was 10,000. Enough for food, enough for bills. Enough for him to survive until he learned to stand on his own. That's for you, I said, but not because you deserve it. Because I'm still your father. He stared at the envelope like it burned him. Where are you going? Away, I replied simply. When? Will you be back? I don't know. His eyes widened. For a second, the anger disappeared, and something like fear flickered through. You're actually leaving?
Yes.
I walked past him, dragging my suitcase into the hallway. Each step felt lighter than the one before. You can't, he shouted, grabbing my arm. I gently pulled my arm free. You threw water on? Me? You told me I was a burden. This house is not a home for me anymore. He swallowed, eyes wet but defiant. Fine, go see if I care. I looked into his eyes one last time. You will? With that, I walked out the door. The morning air felt fresh, almost cleansing. A taxi waited for me outside. I placed my bag inside and climbed in. Asked the car. Pulled away. I saw him standing in the doorway, angry, confused, scared, but I didn't look back again. At the airport. I checked in, went through security, and sat by the large window overlooking the runway. For the first time in years, I felt something warm inside me. Hope. A new life was waiting, a new beginning. A place where I wasn't a burden, a place where I could breathe again. When my flight was called, I stood up slowly, and without hesitation, I walked toward my future. My flight landed after nearly 14 hours, touching down in a place where the air smelled different, free or untouched by the weight I had carried for years. As I stepped out of the airport, the breeze hit my face, gently, as if welcoming a man who had finally chosen himself. I breathed in deeply. For once, I wasn't rushing home to responsibilities, arguments, or demands. I wasn't returning to a house where my presence irritated someone. I was simply existing. I took a taxi to a modest hotel near the coast. The sky was a bright blue, and the roads were lined with palm trees bending softly in the wind. I entered my room, a simple space with a small balcony. I placed my suitcase down and walked straight outside. The view opened to the ocean, waves rolling endlessly toward the shore. I stood there for a long time, letting the roar of the sea drown out the last traces of my old life. For the first 2 days, I barely spoke to anyone. I visited small cafes, walked along the beach, and watched sunsets turn the sky into colors I had forgotten existed. Each hour felt like reclaiming a piece of myself that had been buried under years of disrespect. But on the third day, reality tapped my shoulder. My phone buzzed 5 missed calls from my son, 7 messages, each more frantic than the last. Where are you? You can't just disappear. Come back. We need to talk. Why are you doing this? And then finally, I'm sorry, I think. I stared at the screen for a long while. Not because I felt tempted to return, but because it amazed me how quickly people panic when their comfort is disturbed. For years, he never wondered how I felt. Now suddenly, my absence echoed louder than my presence ever did. I typed a short reply. I am safe. Nothing more. No explanations. No apologies. I owed him none. That evening I walked to the beach. Again, families laughed together. Children built sandcastles. Couples strolled hand in hand. Everyone seemed connected, something I had been starved of for a long time. I found an empty bench and watched the waves curl onto the shore. An older man sat beside me a few minutes later. His white beard flowed like a soft cloud, and his eyes held a gentleness that reminded me of a time when life felt kinder. Beautiful. Evening, he said. It is, I replied. We sat quietly until he asked, traveling alone? Yes. He nodded slowly, as if he understood more than I had said. Sometimes leaving is the only way to heal. His words struck something deep inside me. I didn't leave for adventure, I said. I left because staying hurt. He looked at the horizon. Then you made the right choice. I don't know why, but I found myself talking about my son, about the disrespect, about the water thrown on my face, about the years of thank. He listened without interrupting, without judging, without asking why I tolerated it for so long. When I finished, he placed a hand on my shoulder. You didn't leave a home, he said softly. You left a prison? Those words settled into my heart like truth I had been avoiding. When I returned to the hotel, another message from my son waited. Dad, please answer. I don't understand. Why would you take everything? I typed back honestly. Because it was mine. No anger, no explanation. Just truth. Days passed, and slowly, the messages changed. The arrogance faded. The commands softened. The desperation grew. I didn't know I depended on you so much. I'm struggling. Bills are due. I can't manage everything alone. Can we talk? Please? Each message showed the reality he had never faced before. But I wasn't ready. Healing is not a sprint. It is a quiet rebuilding, brick by fragile brick. One morning I woke early and walked to the market. I bought fresh fruit, sat by the pier, and ate slowly while watching fishermen cast their nets. Life here moved at a different pace. 1. For the first time in a very long while, I didn't feel like a burden. I felt like a man. That afternoon, as I stood at the balcony watching the waves, a final message came through. Dad, I'm scared. Please come home. I closed my eyes, not in anger, not in satisfaction, but in quiet disbelief that it took losing me for him to finally see me. Still, I didn't reply. Not yet. Some lessons take time to sink in, and I was in no hurry. For the first time in decades, time was mine. The next morning, I woke up before the sun rose. The sky was still dark, holding on to the last traces of night. I stepped onto the balcony, feeling the cool breeze wrap around me like a quiet reminder that healing doesn't happen all at once. It happens in small, gentle waves. I closed my eyes and let the air fill my lungs. For the first time, I felt truly rested, truly alive. But when I returned inside, my phone buzzed again. Another message from him. I stared at the screen for a long moment before opening it. Dad, please, just talk to me once. I miss you. I don't know what to do. Miss me. It almost felt unreal reading that. For years, he barely acknowledged my presence. Now my absence had become a wound he didn't know how to mend, but I still didn't reply. Not out of spite, no. That part of me had already quieted. I simply wasn't ready. You cannot tear yourself apart for someone and then instantly put the pieces back together just because they finally felt your loss. I left the phone on the table and walked down to the shore. The waves were calmer today, rolling gently, almost whispering their own stories. I sat on the sand and watched people begin their mornings. Joggers running past, fishermen preparing for the day, children chasing the tide. Everyone seemed to belong somewhere. For a long time I didn't, but here, I felt something I had been missing. Peace. Later, I visited a small cafe I had discovered earlier. The owner, a kind woman with a warm smile, served me tea and bread. She greeted me like an old friend, even though she barely knew me. That simple kindness filled a part of me that had been empty for too long. When I returned to my hotel room, in the afternoon, my phone was vibrating nonstop. A long string of messages waited. I paid the electricity bill late. They charged me extra. I didn't know groceries cost so much. I'm trying, I swear, but everything is harder than I thought. I'm sorry for everything. Please come home. His words were no longer angry, no longer entitled. They were raw, uncertain, almost childlike. For the first time, I sat down and read them carefully. Every message, every apology, every fear. My heart softened. Because he deserved forgiveness, but because forgiveness is something a father gives to himself as much as to his child. The forgiveness doesn't mean forgetting, and it doesn't mean returning to a place where your dignity was bruised. That evening, as the sun began to set, painting the sky in gold and red, I decided to send him a voice note. Not long, not emotional, just honest. I pressed record. Take responsibility for your life, I said quietly. Learn to stand without leaning on me. I am safe. I am healing. And you need to grow. I sent it, no explanations. No promises. For a few minutes I didn't receive a reply. I watched the waves shimmer in the fading light, wondering if he would respond with anger or tears or silence. Then my phone buzzed. One final message from him. Dad, I will try. I don't want to lose you. I stared at the screen, feeling something warm in my chest, something like hope. Fragile, small, but real. That night, I walked along the beach again. The moon hung low, casting a silver path across the water. The world felt quiet, safe, open. And in that quiet, I understood something clearly. Leaving wasn't abandoning him. Leaving was teaching him. Leaving was loving him in a way he would understand, only when he had to build his own life with his own hands. I sat on the sand, letting the waves crawl toward my feet. Somewhere far away, my son was learning to cook his own meals, pay his own bills, live his own days. And here, I was learning to breathe without guilt. The world was wide. Life wasn't over. My story didn't end with humiliation in a kitchen. It was only beginning now in a distant shore, under a foreign sky, where a tired father finally became a man with choices again. I looked out at the water and whispered to myself, I deserve this peace. Yes, I truly did. The morning of my third day abroad began differently. I woke up not to stress or heaviness, but to sunlight slipping gently through the curtains. For the first time in many years, I didn't feel the weight of someone's expectations on my shoulders. I stretched slowly, breathed deeply, and let the new day settle into my bones. This was freedom, quiet, simple, and overdue. After breakfast, I walked to a nearby market where locals greeted each other with warmth. No one looked at me with judgment. No one measured my worth by my usefulness. I blended into the crowd like a man starting life all over again. I felt light, almost young. But as afternoon approached, my phone buzzed again. This time, it wasn't a message from my son. It was a voice call. I stared at the screen for several seconds, unsure whether to answer. His name flashed again and again. On the fourth ring, I finally picked up. His voice cracked before he said anything. Dad, please don't hang up. I just want to talk. I said nothing. Silence is sometimes the only way to let someone reveal their truth. He took a shaky breath. I know you won't come back. I understand that now. I don't deserve to ask, but I just want you to know. I'm sorry. Truly. His sincerity was unfamiliar, almost fragile. I could hear the exhaustion in his voice, the fear, the regret. It wasn't the voice of the man who once threw water in my face. It was the voice of his son finally standing face to face with the consequences of his own arrogance. I've been trying, he continued quietly. The bills, the housework, the responsibility, it's overwhelming. I didn't realize how much you handled, how much you gave. I thought you'd always be there, no matter how I treated you, but I was wrong. Still, I stayed silent. Not out of anger this time, out of firmness. He needed to speak, to reflect, to understand the full weight of what he had done. I told Mom's picture today, he whispered, voice trembling, that I failed you, but I broke everything because I forgot how to love you. I don't know if you'll ever forgive me, but I will spend my life trying to be better. Those words, they softened something deep inside me. Yet I didn't rush to comfort him. That's what fathers often do, protect even when the child is wrong. But today was different. Today, he needed to stand on his own. I'm not asking you to return, he added. Just tell me you're okay, please. After a long silence, I finally spoke. I'm okay, and I want you to be okay too. He exhaled shakily, as if those words alone lifted a mountain off his chest. I'll be, he whispered. I promise. We didn't discuss money. We didn't discuss the past. We didn't discuss the future. Some things don't need explanations. They need time, and healing takes its own pace. That evening, I walked to the harbor. The sky was a slow painting of oranges and purples, and boats swayed gently like they, too, understood the peace of letting go. I sat on a bench and watched the world move calmly around me. Children laughed, couples strolled by, and the air smelled faintly of salt and fresh bread. Life felt wide again. For years, I had shrunk my world to fit inside the walls of a house, where I was treated like a burden. I had convinced myself that endurance was the same as love, but distance had taught me something different. Love without respect is just slow self-destruction. My phone buzzed once more. A single text from my son. Thank you for answering today. It meant more than you know. I'll keep trying. I won't fail you again. Read it, then locked my phone and slipped it into my pocket. I didn't need to respond. Some messages are meant to be read, felt, and carried, not replied to. As the sun sank deeper into the horizon, I realized something important. I wasn't running away. I was moving forward. The man who had been humiliated, ignored, and belittled had walked out of that house. But the man sitting on this bench, the man watching the sunset on foreign shores, was someone new. Someone free. Someone whole. I whispered to the sea. This is my life now. A soft breeze brushed against my face, as if agreeing. I stood up, walked slowly along the waterfront, and let the world embrace me. The past no longer chained me. The future no longer scared me. And somewhere far away, his son was learning, finally learning what it meant to value the man who gave him everything. This wasn't just an ending. This was a beginning I had earned, the beginning I deserved. And, for the first time in many years, I walked toward it without looking back.